Good evening, one and all. Welcome to the first meeting of the Finance and Public Services Overview and Scrutiny panel meetings for this municipal year. So let's have a look. What have we got tonight? Item 1 on the agenda is the evacuation procedure. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Use the stairs, do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Virgin Money building on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door which you entered or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by green fire exit signs. Should you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. The meeting is being recorded but not live streamed tonight. Okay, so on to apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Watkins, who's kindly been substituted by Councillor Phillips. Thank you, Councillor Phillips. And I see any more apologies? Thank you very much. Great, thank you. Moving swiftly on to the minutes of the previous meeting then, item 3. Any proposer for the minutes? Councillor Kenner, seconded Councillor Clark. Any points anybody wishes to raise on the minutes? I'll take a show of hands if we're all happy to adopt the minutes. I can sign them. Thank you very much. Get that done now. Item 4, which is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest that are not in the pre-printed schedule, please? No. Thank you. Sorry? Any declarations of interest that are not printed in the schedule? Councillor Kenner.
That my employment has changed, but officers are aware and the schedule will be updated accordingly. Thank you.
Amendments to the declarations of interest for the schedule? Thank you. Moving swiftly on to item 5, public consultation. Has anybody indicated? No. Thank you. So item 6, questions to Cabinet. We have 20 minutes set aside, and I see we have both relevant Cabinet members here tonight. So anybody with any questions for members of the Cabinet? Early bath for you two then, and do you have any particular points that you wish to make to the panel? Okay, thank you very much. Moving swiftly on to item 7, which is updating the outdoor pitch booking policy. So we have a report on this one. Can we have the report, please?
Thank you. Good evening, councillors. So the purpose of tonight's report is to share the updated outdoor pitch booking policy. Members of the panel that be able to accept the updated policy changes, or obviously reject or ask questions on any of the changes. You should have all obviously received the policy that's been updated, so I'm just going to highlight some of the key changes to this document. There's been a change in the contact details and job titles of the pitch booking officer. This is now being managed via the team at Nuneaton Harriers as part of the service level agreement between Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council and Nuneaton Harriers Athletics Club. There's updated links to the most recent charges and fee information, which has used direct links to the NBBC website. This is to ensure that the document is future-proof and relevant at all times. We've updated the wording to ensure, as a minimum, hirers have £5 million public liability insurance. We've added links directly to bylaw web pages to ensure that the policy remains in date. There's been rewording of cancellation charges to enable cover of late cancellations and the criteria for cancelling as well. There's been the removal of Pingle's Leisure Centre outside space, as this is now managed under the leisure contract, which is managed by Everyone Active. Additional wording has been added to ensure that any damages caused to facilities are repaired by Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council, but that we then invoice users. There's been the inclusion of the requirements of an email address on all bookings and a second contact name and contact details. There's been the removal of a number of pavilions that are no longer open or that are unsuitable for hire or are under other self-management agreements. And we've also removed the reference to some of the bylaws as well, which are no longer relevant. So I hand back over to the chair if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you for the report. Very, very interesting. And I'll open this up to any member that wishes to raise any points on this.
Under the policy the policy that we have, obviously they'd sign the declaration that they would make charges. We'd then have a process that we'd follow with the team in regards to invoicing that, and obviously following those means. So it would also mean that if they failed to pay, they would actually not be able to also hire any other facilities across the borough. So that there's also that reassurance as well that we've got, that we could prevent them from hiring other pitches or pavilions, etc. Thank you.
Any other member? Thank you. Well, I'm pleased to see that we've got this, and in particular I'm pleased to see that it includes provisions that where the facilities are not left in good repair or littered, that the hirer is responsible for the costs of cleaning the facilities, which is great. The recommendation on this is that we accept the revised policy or that we reject it. I'll put forward, for the purpose of moving this forward, that are we happy to accept the policy? Have a proposal on that then, please? Councillor Tromans, lovely, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Kenner, that's great. Thank you. All those in favour of adopting the policy, please? I think that's that unanimous. Anybody against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Unanimous on that one. Thank you. That moves us on to item 8, which is the Integrated Performance Report for Q4. I think we have somebody here to help us with this one. Thank you.
Yep, I'm here, Chair. Yep. Thank you, Chair. I'm Steve Gore, Risk Management and Performance Officer. One of my roles is to pull together corporate performance reports. In relation to the report that comes to this panel, I'd just like to run through what information is included before I provide the summary for the latest quarter. The original report consisted of the appendices A to C. I think I should say, first of all, that you will see performance with targets and without targets. That's because traditionally performance has targets, but a number of our service areas have undergone what are called lean system reviews or process efficiency reviews. And the lean system philosophy is not to have targets, rather concentrate on improvement. So where you see no targets, it just means that that service area has undergone a lean system review. Appendix A links finance to relevant performance, and this information only comes to scrutiny panels. Appendix B relates to the strategic risk register, which is reviewed quarterly with management team individually and collectively, because risks are owned individually by directors or collectively by management team as a group. Once that process is completed, I update the document and its status accordingly. Appendix B shows a summary of the status followed by a complete copy of the latest version dated for document control purposes. As regards the status summary, that's calculated by totaling up the number of risks satisfactorily managed, which are net green and net amber. Net meaning given the mitigations that we've put in place. A percentage is then calculated, totaling up all the net green and amber over the total. When I provide the summary for the fourth quarter, I will also give a verbal update on the main changes that have been made to the document. Appendix C is the executive summary to the strategic performance report. This is reviewed monthly by management team and quarterly by cabinet. It comprises of 9 performance indicators / measures under 4 headings: finance, people and service delivery, processes, and improvement. The executive summary shows positive aspects, overperformance, and areas for improvement, underperformance. Where any of the 19 because it's done by exception, where any of the indicators are not mentioned, it just means that they're on target. When I'm producing all this information, I liaise with managers to get sufficient commentary for the panel to understand performance issues. However, you do have the option to invite managers to attend via the chair. So when you receive the report, which is normally 2 weeks prior to the meeting, if you could, at your earliest opportunity, review this information to decide whether you require managers to attend and contact the chair as soon as possible, that will allow plenty of time for a manager or suitable deputy to attend the meeting. I'm emphasising that point because I'm trying to make this agenda item as effective as it can be. I pull all the information together, but I haven't got the detailed knowledge of the service areas to answer specific performance questions, and that can be pretty frustrating for all of us. One final point I'd like to mention: I'm already in talks with senior management about tweaking the report. Nothing major. It's just that we feel that we could provide more help in making information more pertinent to individual OSPs, and you'll see that change in the next quarter. It's appropriate because it'll be the first quarter of the new year. Appendices D and E have been added at the request of a former panel, and these relate to, firstly, Appendix D, freedom of information requests and environmental information requests outside of their designated timescale, which is 20 days. These are anonymised, so there are no personal details, just details of the requests. I think I should say that environmental requests are a statutory obligation on the council to provide any information it holds on the environment. Appendix E similarly shows complaints outside of their timescale of 10 days. Again, they're anonymised. There's one other piece of information included in the report, and that's in the initial narrative, and it relates to covert surveillance. There hasn't been any, and the legal section advised me that there are very unlikely to be any. However, each quarter I do ask the question. So that's the information that's included in the report, and I'll just summarise the results for the latest quarter. Appendix A, I think the first thing I should say is that the financial information available, the latest financial information, relates to the third quarter, not the fourth quarter. That's because the finance section have had major issues with staff turnover and recruitment. The performance information shows of the 20 performance measures, 9 have improved, 4 declined, 5 stayed the same, and 2 have no trend. The 4 declined measures are parks contract monitoring, processing of private sector disabled facility grants, removal of private sector property hazards, and the average time to process planning applications. Appendix B, the strategic risk register, the status shows that at the end of the fourth quarter, net green 12, net amber 4, net red 3. So therefore, 84%, 16 of the measures are satisfactorily managed, the target being 80%. The net red risks are R1, accommodation needs, R4, economic vibrancy, and R20 relate to the pandemic. And the key updates, R1, accommodation needs, was updated for the formulation of the town centre strategy and the development of the supplementary planning document. R6, arson and accidental fire, a planned action has been added relating to fire and carbon monoxide detection systems. R7, breakdown of council services, 2 planned actions have been added regarding the introduction of a business continuity planning policy and appointment of a head of people and culture to lead on emergency planning. R8, failure to deliver key elements of the corporate plan. A reference has been added to building a better borough, replacing delivering our future as the corporate plan. And finally, R16, cyber security. A planned action has been added relating to a cyber security peer review. In relation to Appendix C, the executive summary of the strategic performance report, of the 19 measures, 11 are green, none are amber, and 8 are red. The red measures are working days lost to short-term sickness absence, working days lost to long-term sickness absence, short-term return to work interview compliance within 3 days, agency staff spend, delivering our future monitoring assessment, health and safety monitoring assessment, and annual development reviews completed. In relation to freedom of information requests and environmental information requests, Appendix D, 618 were received, 617 completed, 132 were late, and 1 was outstanding. And finally, in relation to the complaint summary, Appendix E, 1,021 were received, 1,115 were completed, 319 were late, and 6 were outstanding. And that completes the summary for the 4th quarter.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. I think we have Brent Davis available to answer questions from members on Appendix B. But what I would recommend here is that, as we've heard, that items R1 and R4 apply to the housing OSP as well as to this, and they're going to have a member available at that OSP to actually answer questions. So if members have got any particular questions relating to those 2 risks, I think we can have those in writing, taken from this panel. They can be answered by the officer at the next panel that comes up where they've got the person available, and then we can all have written answers on that and verbal answers for those present at that meeting, which means it's a one hit for the officer rather than having them here twice to answer effectively the same questions to 2 panels. Everybody happy with that? Right, great. So what I would say is, any member then? Any questions? Councillor Downs.
I'm no mathematician, but I've got one question. On the complaints, the 10-day target, number of complaints received, 1,021. Number of complaints completed, 1,115. You can't complete more than you've received. So I'd just like that question answered if I can. Thank you.
Steve, are you able to give us some sort of...
I'm just checking the actual summary that was provided in the report, and maybe it's just a transposition error.
Chair, if I can you hear me, Chair, as well, by any chance? Brent?
Yes, of course.
Yep. So in terms of that, that's because so what we see in that report there is the number of complaints received in that month do absolutely relate to the ones that come through the door from the first of that month to the end of that month. The complaints that can be dealt with in that month may have actually come into the council in the previous month and have then, within the 10 contact days or however long it's taken to deal with them have slipped into that next calendar month. So the two figures are not directly comparable.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just this overall report, everywhere I look, it seems to be problems with staffing issues. So a couple of questions. What action are we taking to address the working days lost with long-term absence? Because it's 7.62 full-time against a 5.25 target. And also the agency staff. We need agency staff sometimes, yes or no, but what percentage of the risks are due to staff shortages, and what action is being addressed to deal with this? Thank you.
I can, Chair. So in terms of staff absences, then we have a well-documented and long-standing sickness absence management procedure. So in terms of those long-term absences, people are moved through that procedure in accordance with various targets, etc., etc. What we have had is a number of staff who've been extremely ill, which sometimes tends to happen. And we have had some of that long-term sickness over the 12 months in total related to COVID absences as well. So that has skewed the figures somewhat for the 21-22 financial year. And just to say as well that the reasonably newly constituted employment committee will receive information on staff absence levels as well, and sort of more details, and would come to the OSP on various actions to deal with that, and potentially we might be looking at, again, anonymised, more detailed activities on that. So that's what happens in terms of the staff absences. And it is just to stress that we shouldn't forget the 21-22, that we were still in the midst of COVID. In terms of the agency spend, that is made up really of three chunks, and I can't give detailed breakdowns of what the exact amounts are, but the three reasons driving that agency spend are: firstly, there's some of it relates to backfilling for sickness absence. Now that almost entirely relates to refuse collection, because you can't. You essentially need a HGV driver to drive a refuse collection truck, and you need people at the back of the truck to put the bins on the truck. So you need to go out with your rounds fully staffed up for that. So in terms of cover for sickness absence, that is almost entirely related to refuse collection activities. The second big chunk of the expenditure on agency staff is where we have vacant posts and we're not able to recruit to them. So sort of normal standard vacant posts, and we can't recruit to them. So the examples of that include planning officers, environmental health officers, legal officers, accountancy staff. So that's instances where we can't recruit. We still need to do the work, so we pull agency employees in to cover those gaps in the organisation. And then the third amount of and one of the examples, sorry, Chair, of that is the Director of Finance. Members will be aware that Stephen Fitzgerald was with us from early August until early May, whilst we were in the process of recruiting a new Director of Finance, of which we had to we had 3 attempts to be able to successfully recruit Vicky Summerfield. And then the third chunk of the agency expenditure is where we would engage individuals on a short-term contract to deliver a certain piece of work. So some of the stuff that we've done around the future high streets bids and the transforming, the future high streets and the Towns Fund bids, where we needed to produce bids to submit to government to get that funding. Then we've engaged individuals to do that work. So that's a very time limited engagement there. That's sort of over and above our normal staffing levels. But sorry, Chair, and then the last thing I'd say on that is that overall, though, the savings from vacant posts added to sort of grant funding that we've received to do with that last category of the employees where they're specifically doing jobs. If you add those amounts together, that comes to more than the amount we've spent on agency spend in 21-22.
Councillor Hammersley, I think you want to ask more questions about that?
It appears that there seems to be a bit of juggling and firefighting going on with staff, and I wondered what if there's any underlying issues with employing people or them not being employed. Is there? I'm not sure who is looking why we're not being attractive to attract these staff to work for MBBC. So working on a shoestring with staff, I can understand things will drop. So I'm not sure why the core reason is for us not attracting the staff that you need. Thank you.
That one?
I was about to say, can you give us some information about that,
I can share. So there's a report will be going to the Employment Committee. I'm just having a look on my piece of paper that's stuck on my wall here. It's on the 15th of June, looking at some suggestions to make us more attractive as an employer. Now, part of that will absolutely relate to the amount we pay. And to put it quite simply, trying to increase the amount we pay. So as a council, we pay relatively lowly compared to other councils. So there's some suggestions within that report there, and the Employment Committee are very keen to really get into that in depth and assess how we can pay more and what's the appropriate amount to pay more and how do we pay that, etc., etc. So there's that bit about us needing to pay more to compete against other councils and other public sector organisations, such as the civil service, schools, hospitals, etc., etc. And then the other more difficult thing and work is taking place across the West Midlands Employers Organisation, which is a sort of a consortium group of all of the councils in the West Midlands. And in fact, the Local Government Association is looking into this as well, is the sort of the reduced attractiveness of local government as a whole to work in. So we know that there is a national shortage of planning officers. There's a national shortage of public sector accountants. There's a national shortage of environmental health officers. So there's work at a sort of a more macro level to attract people and sell the pluses and the sort of benefits in the wider sense of working for the public sector and local government in particular. So there's a couple of things happening there at our own level. Review of remuneration. How can we improve that to make ourselves more attractive? And a more macro level of which we're tied into. How do we make local government more attractive? Full stop.
Thank you, Brent. Any further questions on this report? Or any observations? Okay, so that's fantastic. We noted that report. That's brilliant. So we can move on to item 9, which is the forward plan on page 171. This is for noting. Any comments at all on this, please? Comments? No? In which case, are we happy to note this, please? Thank you. Fantastic. Moving on to the draft work programme at item 10, which is in the addendum. Again, we just need to approve this or make any changes or observations. Any member? Councillor Kenner.
Thank you, Chair. Just turn your microphone off. Members, just turn to page 6 of the addendum, which is second to last. I would like to propose an amendment to the first part of that to establish a working group on changing places. I'd like to amend that to bring that forward to get the ball rolling on getting a policy on that, so we can start to recruit members as soon as possible and to get the working party meeting.
Okay. Sorry, happy to move to a vote on this one if everybody's happy to bring this one forward. Can I suggest that we perhaps bring this forward onto the agenda for the next meeting then, and we can make that a formal item then. Is everybody happy with that?
When is the next meeting?
When's the next meeting? Thinking about this again, if we're happy to move this forward, can I suggest then that we just get an advertisement out on this?
Reconvening, because the working group did exist at the start of last year.
Right.
So
Sounds like a much better plan than I could have come up with. So everybody happy with that?
the working group gets started, then you can bring it back to the report.
Everybody happy with that? Any dissent? Thank you. The only other observation I would have looking at this is that item 12 on page 5, which was for proactive training to be reviewed and introduced. Basically, anybody that's been elected since 2019 has already been trained in that manner. The rest of us have effectively been trained in that manner. Do we need to have this on the work programme still? If not, my suggestion is that we take it off the work programme, because we'll be looking at something that we're already doing.
Yeah.
Happy with that? Yeah. Wonderful, thank you. Take that one off. Subject to those amendments, happy to approve the draft work programme? Any dissent? Thank you. Brilliant, thank you.
We want to remind the panel members they can submit work programme suggestion forms. They aren't flooding. I've got credits for briefing them,
So, yeah, obviously, of course, if anybody does have anything that they want to bring forward, the work programme form does exist, and clearly anything that is brought forward, we can consider and decide whether we want to add it to the programme. Thank you.